When she was young, machines rolled through the owl's home, not only destroying her tree, but also replacing the forest with a flat rock desert. In the process of destruction, the owl lost its parents and siblings. Ever since, she had to struggle living in the crooks and crevices of buildings, ever hungry, ever lonely, ever in danger of being discovered by the monkeys. After many years, she noticed that a dog was crying. She approached the dog and asked it what was wrong. The dog answered,
"I lost my bone. My master gave me a bone. I buried it. I can't remember where I put it. Now I will never see it again."
In response, the owl laughed.
Aphorism: those that have truly suffered envy those that may still shed tears.
When the vow dried up, no one could remember such a severe drought. In the entire village, there was only one well that still provided water. What is worse, some villagers were clearly wasting the little water that yet remained. So, Elias stood up before all and vowed to God that if he had the power, he would correctly manage the little water that remained. Most villagers trusted him, so they gave him the power. Yet, some villagers, unwilling to accept hardship, threatened him. Elias tried to resist them, but eventually it became clear that if he did not let them overuse the water, they would kill him. So, he allowed a few to overuse the water ran out, and the entire village died of thirst.
Aphorism: he who is false to his oaths fears mortal men more than he fears God.
The proud oak and his saplings. An old oak stood tall, proudly sucking up more sunlight than all the other trees. The saplings growing near resented him. They begged him to let a few rays through, but gluttonous, greedy, and justified by vanity, he kept all the sunlight to himself. A squirrel would often warn him, but the tall oak tree did not care. Unfortunately, one day a severe storm uprooted the forest's tallest trees. The first to go was the proud oak tree. How it hurt! He was broken, finished, but what made it worse was seeing how his saplings cheered. Finally, they too could feed on the sunlight. Now the squirrel returned, and she said,
Aphorism: not even your own children shall drop honest tears on top of your grave.
Hyena's revenge. When the hyena found food, the lion would take it. When the hyena talked to other animals, the lion would push him out of the conversation. The situation for the hyena was desperate until a little mouse told him a secret. So, the hyena acted like he had found a valuable box. The lion, of course, came to take it. However, when the lion opened the box, a dozen tiny mice scurried out. The mighty lion shouted in fear and climbed a tree in panic. All the animals in the forest laughed. He looked so ridiculous that even the other lions were unable to contain their laughter.
Aphorism: the best revenge is a harm so humorous that even the friends of the injured will not resist laughing at his pain.
The Historian's Book. A mysterious woman entered the king's palace. She offered the king a book that she claimed could foretell the future. The king was initially excited, but then the woman warned.
When you read it, what is predicted will be occurring and there is no way of avoiding it.
The king was taken aback. He considered the meaning and then jeered.
So, your book does not foretell, it merely reports the present.
Considering it useless, the king rejected the woman's gift, but a wise historian disagreed. He told the king to accept the gift because whenever the book is read, it prevents the final stage in the passage of time.
Aphorism: the future is always remembered only after it has already happened. Before then, it is simply yet to be forgotten.
Without a teacher. Wishing to learn and thinking that the best teacher would be the most expensive, a young man gave all his money to a teacher. Unfortunately, the alleged teacher then disappeared, leaving the young man without an education and without any money. His life, which had been easy up to this point, became harsh. He had to learn, by himself, how to gather food, where he could sleep, who he could trust, and who he should distrust. He learned what life was all about. Then, once he was all wise from the pain of lack, the teacher returned and told the young man.
Aphorism. No doubt it is the sophists or scientists, not the philosophers, who are the wise, as even life, or God itself, charges a cost for all its lessons.
It was a bright morning when humans awoke. They were primitive creatures, cautious and timid. They lived in fear, fear of the dark, fear of predators, fear even of the unknown. But as the sun rose, so did their civilization, their culture, their knowledge. After fire came music, then language, and ever daring, they reached for mathematics and industry. Alas, in the afternoon, the air thickened. Regret consumed them. Through war and pollution, they had ruined their own home. When night fell, therefore, they were forced to return to how they were in the morning. Yet, they were no longer afraid. They understood their place and accepted their fate.
Aphorism. People are timid in the morning, daring in the midday, regretful in the afternoon, and acceptant at nightfall.
The Wolf and the Nightingale. There was once a time when the wolf was the most appreciated animal in the forest. He kept the lumberjack away, and so all the trees and animals loved him. Yet, one day a nightingale showed up. The wolf noticed how the trees and all the animals enjoyed his music. This infuriated him.
That silly bird is soaking up all of the attention.
Therefore, one night, he sneaked up to the nightingale, pounced on it, and ate it. All the animals and trees were shocked.
Why would you eat the one who brings music to the forest?
Spiteful, the wolf insisted.
It is only fair. He had all the admiration, and I had none.
Aphorism. Fairness may be the anvil, but envy is the hammer that forges the blade of vengeance.
Daydreaming butterfly. A worker ant said to the lazy butterfly.
How can you simply sit there doing nothing?
The butterfly smiled and replied.
Well, I can't do much, which is why I enjoy looking at the other animals and imagining what I would do if I were them. Seeing those beavers, I imagine the lakes, bridges, and engineering marvels I would build. Or look at those bees, I imagine building a hive as large as a tree and filling the forest with flowers. Or consider yourself, I imagine leading the other ants against the queen and freeing myself from her domain.
The ant got angry and replied.
Your daydreams are worthless. Better to do a little than to merely imagine doing a lot.
Aphorism. Turning lead into gold is not a daydream. No, no. Rather, daydreams are lead turned to gold. The blocked river. When the river was young, it rolled down the mountain slope, collecting the melting snow, the morning dew, and the occasional rainfall, until gladly it poured into the ocean, feeling proud of its achievement. However, one day a giant boulder rolled into it. The weight, the splash, it hurt so much, and it obstructed its flow. At first, the river asked any large animal that approached it if they could move the boulder. It asked a buffalo, an elephant, even a rhinoceros, but none could budge the boulder. The years passed until a foolish fish asked.
Why don't you flow to the ocean?
The river became sad and kept silent.
Aphorism. There are pains so painful that speaking about them makes them even more painful, and keeping silent does not make them less painful.
Crisis Town. When Crisis Town fell into an economic crisis, the panicking people called on a wealthy town and a poor town to give them advice. The counselors from the wealthy town advised that they should not tax the rich and not invest in upbringing the poor. The counselors from the poor town insisted that those very same practices made them poor. So, what was Crisis Town to do? Wealthy town said, follow my example. Poor town said, avoid my example. Both advices were the same. The rich said they were made rich by the same thing that the poor said made them poor. Luckily, an anonymous voice shouted.
Aphorism. Since being self-critical is essential for wisdom, the truly wise is a herald, not an example of wisdom.
The lucky farmer. In a dry village where the farmers would struggle, a single rain cloud came and rained on a farmer's land. Thanks to this rain cloud, the farmer collected the most bountiful and tasty crops that anyone in the village had ever known. Some said this farmer was the luckiest farmer that ever was. Others argued that this farmer had benefited from a divine miracle. Yet, the farmer himself did not like those explanations. He feared that if people believed that he was lucky or blessed, then they would say his fortune was not fair. So, he spent much of the money he made from selling the crops advertising what a hardworking farmer he was.
Aphorism. If people were satisfied with good luck and miracles, deserve would not have been invented.
The lucky peacock and the unlucky mouse. In a faraway forest, there was a peacock whose colorful feathers dazzled all who ever saw him. Yet, most animals thought that the peacock was too lucky, too fortunate, and they hated him for it. The forest also contained a lonely mouse. He was small, of a bland color. No one ever paid any attention to him. He was basically invisible, with no friends or enemies. One day their paths crossed. Without seeing the mouse, the peacock sighed.
How I long for peace, for everyone that sees me resents me.
The mouse, hearing the peacock's lament, whispered to himself.
And how I long for recognition, for all ignore me, none sees me.
Aphorism. The curse of good luck is animosity, while that of bad luck is anonymity.
The eagle and the sparrow. One day, a violent storm hit the forest. The confident eagle flew without fear. But as the winds grew fiercer, the eagle found herself struggling to remain aloft. Despite her confidence, she was thrown about, crashed into a cliff, and was injured. On the forest floor, the timid sparrow huddled inside a bush. She should have tried reaching a higher tree branch, but her fear paralyzed her, and so the waters rose, and she nearly drowned. After the storm passed, the eagle asked the sparrow.
How did you survive?
The sparrow answered.
I learned that my biggest obstacle was my own timidity.
The eagle laughed and replied.
My biggest challenge was my own recklessness.
Aphorism. The strong should be prudent, and the weak should be bold.
The winner that lost. Paul and Steve had to race up a tall tree, grab a flag, and bring it down to show the others who had reached the top first. Paul seized the flag before Steve. Yet, as they descended the tree, Steve stole the flag from Paul and claimed victory. Paul complained, but none of the other monkeys believed him. He made such a scandal, and he seemed so immature about his defeat that he was kicked out of the monkey troop. Yet, once Paul was gone, a bird that had witnessed Steve's cheating revealed the truth. The other monkeys were so angry that they also threw him out of the troop. So it was that the troop lost its two best climbers.
Aphorism. When cheating, the winner loses as much praise as the loser suffers shame in begrudging the winner.
The proud ram. An odious crow loved the coming of the fall. It meant the beginning of the rutting season. This is when the rams would buckle up against each other in fierce, action-packed fights. The crow would find a nice branch to spectate, always pick sides, and cheer the combat. During one of these fights, a young ram lost its footing, and the other ram got a clean hit that truly shook the young ram. It was thrown back and rolled around in pain. After the fight, the crow said to the defeated ram,
"You must be so ashamed. That guy crushed you."
The young ram replied,
If it had been an odious crow that beat me, but luckily that guy is one of my best friends.
Aphorism. Suffering at another's hand is only disgraceful when you hate the aggressor. The triumph of religion. During winter, the cold drove many to migrate. However, a sheep cried out.
Be confident, the spirit of the forest will keep us warm.
So, the herd stayed together, huddling instead of dividing, and they survived the cold. During the summer, a drought forced many to be selfish. But a sheep cried out.
Be confident, the spirit of the forest will feed us.
So, they peacefully shared the little food they could find until the rains returned. Lastly, during the autumn, a pack of wolves pushed many into a panic. Yet, a sheep cried out.
Be confident, the spirit of the forest will fight alongside us.
So, the herd fought courageously and defeated the wolves.
Aphorism, religion triumphed because nothing could defeat the confidence given by the belief in divinity's favor.
Lioness pride. The lionesses competed over which could be best for the lion. One took pride in being the best food gatherer. Another took pride in being the most caring. A third took pride in being the most attractive. That was their life. They took pride in being the best for the lion. However, it wasn't always like that. There had once been a lioness that took pride in being the best teacher. This worked well while the lion was young. But when the lion became an adult, he disliked how the teacher lioness would correct him. He felt she made him look dumb. So, the lion got rid of the teacher lioness and only retained the cook, the nurse, and the beauty.
Aphorism. To the sexist, women may only be arrogant about their humility. The sheep fox. The fox, knowing that the shepherd had no close family or companions besides his dog, thought she could win his favor by offering him her cleverness.
Good shepherd, I can help you watch over your flock with greater wit than any dog could ever manage. Dogs may be loyal, but they lack my cunning and intelligence.
The shepherd agreed, and for a time, the fox did her job well, outsmarting a few stray wolves and even preventing some nearby thieves from stealing sheep. But unlike the dog, the fox only helped when it suited her. She would disappear for days, chasing her own interests, and return whenever the shepherd had food to offer. One night, a fierce storm struck the valley. The fox, sensing danger, scurried off to shelter. Meanwhile, the dog stayed, struggling. It risked its life, guiding the sheep to safety.
Aphorism, alas, woman would be man's best friend, if dog were not more loyal.
The smartest alien that ever was. On a distant planet, an alien named Genghis Jan was considered the epitome of success. He was so envied, and he was considered so smart and capable. He developed a technology and a business that allowed him to make more money than everyone else. Then he used this money in the same manner than most of the aliens would have used it. Yes, he had the most children ever. Eventually, most aliens were his children. Yet, after he passed away, since most people were siblings, the alien species suffered greatly. Brother and sister were forced to have babies together. So, it was that Genghis Jan was the smartest alien that ever was.
Aphorism, humanity's malady, what fools call intellect, is naught but ability motivated by emotion.
When the proud tiger sleeps. A mighty tiger was feared by all creatures. By day, the tiger roamed the jungle with utmost confidence, but by night, when he closed his eyes in his dreams, he wasn't a predator, he was a tortured prey. Sometimes he was chased by deer, buffaloes, and angry tigresses. Although sometimes he would suffer strange visions. The jungle turned dry, the trees vanishing, and his once powerful body weakened by old age. Exhausted by these dreams, the tiger went to speak to a sloth. He asked it how she could sleep so well, and the sloth answered.
Aphorism, waking the body lulls the character, for only in sleep can the narcissist regret the past and fear the future.
The lost lamb. Distracted, a lamb wandered away from its flock until it realized it was alone. Fearful, it approached a mighty stag and asked if she could travel with him, but the stag replied,
You are not of my kind. We only admit stags as ourselves. We have no place for you.
Next, the lamb encountered an owl, but the owl answered,
I am busy studying the night and the stars. I cannot spare my wisdom on one so lowly.
The lamb continued until it stumbled into a pack of wolves. These said to it,
We love the weak and lonely, so we are glad to welcome you.
The lamb fled in terror. Finally, it curled up beside a large tree and sobbed.
Insult, no God is affectionate enough to include you in his flock.
When God was disappointed. From the very first generation, God noticed that humans chose selfishness and vice over kindness and virtue. Disappointed and angry, he became severe and punishing. He sent great floods, or brought droughts, or rained fire, or delivered plagues. The people, terrified by these displays of divine wrath, began to follow his laws diligently. They built altars and offered sacrifices, they prayed and withheld. For a time, all seemed good. Yet, God noticed a troubling pattern. As soon as the memories of punishment faded, humans would revert to their old ways. He had to perpetually keep enacting his harsh punishments. A profound sadness welled up within God. He withdrew far into the cosmos, and I wonder what became of him.
Aphorism, since law that requires fear is nothing more than coercion, God doesn't wish to be feared, but to be agreed with.
The vain hen. In a grand garden, a hen ruled with vanity. She took great pride in her smooth feathers and perfect posture. She had the habit of strutting proudly before the other animals, certain that her elegance was unmatched. One day, as the hen was parading, she clumsily tripped and fell into a thorny vine. Her once pristine feathers became tangled, and she could not free herself. She was so embarrassed and felt so humiliated. Over the next days, her shame grew into bitterness. Day by day, she plotted her revenge against the vine that had dared to humiliate her. So it was that in a spiteful rage, searching for every scrap of vine, the hen destroyed the whole garden. From afar, a crow that witnessed her deed remarked,
Aphorism, the vainer the hostess that shame impregnates, the more odious the revenge that is birth.
Who is the parent of the seed? Returning from a long voyage, a merchant accidentally dropped a seed he had gathered from a faraway land. The next day, a local villager noticed the seed struggling to sprout. Since it did not look like any sprout he had ever seen before, he decided to tend to it. He made sure it received water, he cleared the debris around it, and even protected it from harsh winds. The seed flourished into a beautiful plant and bloomed flowers that none in the village had ever seen before. People came from afar to admire its beauty and fragrance. Thus, it was that the merchant heard about it. He said that since the seed belonged to him, the plant was also his. The question was put before the king, and he answered,
Aphorism, since a seed cannot flourish without care, the true parent is not the one who planted it, but the one who nurtured it.
Mirror to the peacock. Every morning the peacock would spread his feathers wide, dazzling the other animals with his colorful display. He thought he was the best, the most beautiful. Meanwhile, the owl, lacking color, or long feathers, would keep to himself, either hiding in the shadows, or only coming out at night when none could see him clearly. One day, however, a fierce storm swept through the forest. Both the peacock and the owl were swept up by a gust of air. It battered them, covering them in mud, and pulling off many of their feathers. After the storm passed, when the other animals saw how ugly and dirty the peacock looked, they laughed and jeered. The disheveled and muddy peacock did not understand why the other animals only laughed at him. Therefore, the owl led the peacock to a puddle of water and told him to look at his own reflection. When he did so, to his horror, he saw himself as beautiful as ever, but now even the reflection was laughing back at him.
Aphorism, shame does not mock anyone more than the vain, for in their misfortunes, these not only hear the laughter of others, but also the laughter of their own past self.
The pride of poverty. Hearing about the importance of money, Jeff and Patrick decided to dare one another over who could make the most money. Yes, they decided to compete over who would grow up to be the richer. With time, Jeff's family came into a lot of money. But not Patrick's. His family fell into poverty. This meant that the two boys ceased to interact. They lost all contact. Patrick tried and tried again to become rich, but never managed. Jeff simply enjoyed his luck without feeling any guilt. One day, once they were already adults, working as a waiter, Patrick had to serve Jeff. They recognized each other, but Jeff was not interested in having much interaction with Patrick. He treated him with disdain and kept him at arm's length. Patrick, on the other hand, was annoyed at Jeff's demeanor and character and said he was glad not to be like him.
Aphorism: although underserving wealth makes the wealthy disdain the poor, undeserving the poverty makes the poor proud of his poverty.
The clovers never last. One day, a young hare came across a beautiful patch of clovers. It was vast, verdant, lush, and super tasty. There was more than he could ever eat. The bunny rejoiced, thinking that his life was set, he would never go hungry again. Meanwhile, a turtle was struggling. The increased rainfall had overflowed her peaceful lake. She was forced to abandon her home. Fearful and preoccupied, the turtle felt this was the end of all her happiness. The next day, other animals discovered the patch of clovers that the rabbit was enjoying. What is worse, the congregation of so many animals attracted fierce predators. The rabbit, although initially blessed, now felt that the lucky patch was lost. He could not feed in safety, and the clovers would soon be all gone. Meanwhile, after marching all night and nearly all day, the turtle discovered that the same rainstorm that had overflowed her river also created a new peaceful creek. Although exhausted, she cheered. She had found the perfect new home. Her life became happy once again.
Aphorism: experience teaches that a raindrop of evil never floods the stream of life, and that a salubrious wind never blows all the way to a promised land.
The deaf patron. At a grand art exhibit, where paintings by renowned artists adorned the walls, an art patron walked among the crowd. He was well dressed and carried himself with confidence, speaking passionately about the art he admired and more about the art he despised. Some nodded, but others disagreed. For example, at one moment, a woman tried to voice her own opinion, but the patron waved her off with a dismissive laugh. So, that is how the deaf patron spent the evening, moving from painting to painting, loudly proclaiming his critiques.
This lacks depth. This is mature. That is too modern. I love this. That is incomprehensible. How crude, chaotic nonsense. How childish.
Yet, despite his fervor, despite his attire, despite his money and title, no one was ever convinced of his opinions.
Aphorism: in the art of persuasion, a voice without ears is like a painter without eyes.
Prehistoric religion. A long time ago, cavemen had the habit of marching across the valley, through the forest, up a jagged mountain, all this vast landscape, for the purpose of benefiting their dead friends and family members. Yes, these cavemen would gladly carry treats and sweets across this arduous journey. They would cheer and sing as they left these things at a sacred grove on the peak of a mountain. Curiously, every time a group of cavemen went on this voyage, they would be accompanied by a flock of crows that would fly above them. The cavemen considered the crows a sign of good luck. Yet, unbeknown to the Neanderthals, the crows had the habit of waiting until nighttime and then eating all the sweet cakes that were left at the altar. In fact, it was because the sweets would seemingly disappear overnight that the primitives thought that the souls of the dead were taking the gifts. One day a child crow asked its mother if it was correct for them to take the cavemen's offerings. The wise matronly crow replied,
Aphorism: some think that religion is how the living favor the dead, but the truth is that religion is how the living favor themselves by the dead.
After the famous race. After the race, the turtle did not hesitate to boast and advertise his success. He made a tour of the forest, telling all the animals how he had beaten the rabbit in a race. Yes, the turtle grew so proud and confident that it even began offering classes on how to win foot races. The rabbit also decided to offer classes, but since he had lost the race, he gained few students. Most students wanted to learn from the winner, the turtle. Yet, a crow that was a great fan of spectating foot races noticed that the turtle's students would rarely win their own matches. On the other hand, the rabbit's students would nearly always win. This curiosity perplexed the crow. He decided to investigate and found the rabbit's classes would focus on teaching his students to avoid his mistakes. To not be overconfident and to stay focused, for example. The turtle's classes, on the other hand, would focus on the turtle's successes. He would only teach his students to run the way he runs. Therefore, the investigative crow concluded.
Aphorism: those who did not follow their own advice are the truly wise, for instead of advertising their successes, they advertise what they learned from their mistakes.
The Princess's Little Dog. In a grand palace, the princess had a tiny, fluffy dog named Poppy. Poppy was adored by the princess, carried everywhere in her arms, and fed the finest scraps from the royal table. The other dogs in the palace, scrappy hunting hounds and weary guard dogs, watched with bitter envy. A hunting hound grumbled,
"Why does that pampered pup deserve such a life? We work hard, yet we sleep in the cold."
And an old mastiff sneered,
"He's nothing but a toy. Without the princess, he'd be nothing."
But Poppy, though privileged, remained blissfully unaware of their resentment, curling up each night on a velvet cushion near the princess's throne. One fateful day, the palace was overthrown. The princess fled in the night, leaving Poppy behind. The little dog, now without protection, wandered the palace grounds, confused and trembling. The other dogs saw their chance. They surrounded Poppy, growling and snapping at him. One after another, they took turns chasing him through the gardens, biting at his once pristine fur. Poppy whimpered and ran, his former dignity reduced to nothing. And so, Poppy learned.
Aphorism: the more the fallen is envied, the more the jealous enjoy trampling over him.
The Flight of Lies. Jealous of the wise owl, the sparrows invented a terrible lie. They flew around the forest telling all the animals that greedy for power the owl hoarded his true wisdom. They said that the owl only wished to control others and therefore only spoke lies. Soon enough, all the animals believed the sparrows. He was insulted and chased out of the forest. As he flew away, hurt but trusting in his wisdom, he shouted for all to hear.
Time will vindicate me, the truth always finds its way to the light.
The wise owl was forced to spend his life in the city, struggling for survival. Yet, after many years, he decided to return and reap the correction that time had surely revealed. Unfortunately, to his surprise, nobody recognized him. Generations of sparrows and woodland creatures had come and gone, and tales of greed and lust for power had only faded into obscurity. So it was that the old owl once again flew high and proclaimed to the confusion of all who heard.
Aphorism: those who have suffered calumnies console themselves with the illusion that time reveals everything. Alas, but time only forgets.
Coal for a smile and gems for a tear. One day a strange merchant arrived in the village with 2 large chest boxes. One of these boxes was filled with dirty pieces of coal, the other box was filled with beautiful gems. He placed these chest boxes in the market and opened a shop. Curiously, he stood before his shop and only advertised the sale of the pieces of coal. He shouted with great passion,
This coal can be used to fuel a fire. The fire in turn can keep you warm throughout the night. Likewise, this coal can be used to cook a meal. Meals that would keep you strong or bring joy to your house guest. Yes, My coal does all these things, but what is best about it is how cheaply I give it away. I am willing to exchange a piece of coal for a mere friendly smile.
This seems to all the villagers like a really good price, but then someone asked about the rubies. What was their charge?
For they.
The merchant frowned.
I will only accept tears, a gem for a tear. It could be your own or someone else, but only tears will do.
This seemed to all the customers an even better deal than the coal. So it was that, upon learning of the merchant's prices, the village quickly grew consumed with a frenzy for tears. Some would beat themselves seeking to cry. Others would recall and lament previously forgotten tragedies. A few would even attack and torture the defenseless seeking to steal away their tears. That was the village that day, all seeking to either cry, or to make someone cry on their behalf. When night came, the merchant sold all of the gems in his chest box and barely any of the coal in his coal box. Therefore, he proclaimed,
Aphorism: few are satisfied with wealth and pleasure so cheap that they do not cost anyone even a single teardrop.